Hey folks. For the last 3 years, I've basically been doing tutorials on Virpil equipment and joystick gremlin and such things, and maybe some DCS stuff now and again. Um, so I thought I would have a look at doing a review maybe. All the equipment I've used in my tutorials over the years, I've bought and paid for that myself. That's why a few people have been asking me to do tutorials on like the new button boxes or the newer throttles, but I'm able to do that because I'd actually have to go and buy them myself to do the tutorials. So that's the reason why people keep messaging me and asking me like, "Oh, could you do a tutorial on the new button box?" I go, "I can't because I don't own one, and I can't really afford to go and buy one." So basically, in short, I'm neither sponsored or endorsed by Virpil. So I say all my stuff I've bought for myself. Now, this is the first review I'm going to attempt to publish. I have done a couple of reviews on some equipment in the past. The first one I did was on the Virpil Mongoose T50 CM grip. And I had the grip for about a month and then did it like a basic review of it. And when I went to publish it, they'd actually stopped making them. So there was basically no point in putting a review out for something you couldn't buy anymore. And then the other review I did was for the Mongoose T50 Throttle. That was the very first V1 of the throttle, the first version. And yet again, I had it for like a couple of months, and when I went to like do a review and then publish it, by the time I'd done that, Virpil already went and moved on to the V3. V2. So there's basically no point in publishing a review if nobody was able to buy it. I mean, right now we're up to version 5 in the Virpil throttle. So guys, keep innovating. So disclaimer: this is an actual review, a customer review. So what I mean by customer review, well, I'm an actual customer. I bought this collective and the grip that goes with it with my own hard-earned coin. I didn't get it for free. Virpil didn't send me this. So I can actually be honest, like brutally honest, unlike a lot of the other reviews, because some of the reviews I've seen, and I'm doing air quotes right now, are not actually reviews. They're more like advertising pieces. So I'm not a YouTube reviewer. I'm just a customer. I'm coming at this from my perspective as a customer and as an engineer. I'm an electronics engineer. I've been involved in electronics for 30 years. The stuff I work on has a basically zero tolerance for any design flaws because they're life critical medical devices, as in there is no margin for error. This thing is there to save your life and not kill you. So if I seem overcritical, it's because it's how I'm sort of, my brain's wired to look at things. It has to be defect free as much as humanly possible and as close to perfection. So the review. I'm going to be doing a review of the Virpil Plus Collective. Now this review is based on 2 months of daily use of the collective. I fly for maybe a couple of hours a day, and I was one of the first people to get these from the first batch that went out from the factory. Now I fly helicopters a lot in DCS. I'd probably say maybe 80 to 90% of my flight time in DCS is in helicopters. And I've seen other reviews, and I'm doing air quotes right now when I say reviews, from people who, by the looks of it, don't really fly helicopters or cannot fly helicopters. I'm a decent enough heli pilot, so I wanted to get one of the collectives when they came out. And I just want to apologize in advance if this review seems a bit long-winded or lacking in high production values. I have a pretty crap camera, and I don't really do this stuff for my day job. I mainly do sort of technical videos and stuff. So there are 2 versions of the Virpil Collective. There's the Plus Edition, which has this bit here, this extra bit, which is the throttle part, and the Standard Edition, which is just a metal pole. The innards here obviously common between both of them, and the grip connector at the end is the standard Virpil one, which pretty much all their grips use for connecting in. So let's start this review off. All right, let's just have a quick look at the box itself. So this is the inner box. It comes in with an outer box around it, like a standard cardboard box, and then the usual white Virpil box. You've got the collective here, and in this white box you have the grip. In my case, it was a Alpha L. Nothing really too exciting here. It's just, it's a box with a thing in it with some bubble wrap. So there you go. Okay, so let's look and see what you get along with the Virpil Collective in the box. So you get some of these cable clips. They're used for tidying up the cable that runs from the Collective. And these are designed to clip onto the mount that comes with it, the Virpil supplied mount. You have some screws and washers and nuts, etc. for bolting that mount onto a chair or the actual Virpil Collective chair mount system. You get 3 sets of cams. There's 2 that come in the bag. You get a 40-degree and a 50-degree cam, and the device itself comes with a 30-degree cam pre-fitted. You get this extremely long USB cable. It's 5 meters, which is very, very long for a USB cable. It has the Virpil X99 connector on the end. That's the one that they're using on most of their modern stuff. It's reasonably well constructed. It has EM suppressors on both ends. And this end here, the 2 connectors, you basically have, this one is the default one to use most of the time. You're going to be plugging this one in regardless. But if you're trying to chain a panel using the auxiliary port on the Collective, then they do recommend you put this one in as well. So most of the time we're only going to use this normal USB connector. So this one here has 5-volt ground, data plus and data minus on it. This one has the 5-volt and ground only. So if you try to plug this one in by itself, it's probably not going to work. Now, there are 2 models of Virpil Collective. I have opted to buy the Plus one, which we'll get into later. And with this, you get this little, turn around the right way, this little pack of transfers, which you can then stick onto the Collective throttle part. So that's the what you get in the basic kit. So let's have a look at the available grips that you can put on the end of your Collective. Now, the Collective itself just comes with the Collective. You need to buy the grip as an extra, so you're going to be buying 2 items if you're buying it from Virpil. So the first one up is the Shark of 50, which is modeled on the KA50 Black Shark Collective grip from DCS. So that's the first one they actually marketed for, specifically for the Collectives. Now, the new one that came out this week is the Hawk 60, which is modeled on the UH60 Blackhawk Collective grip, so to speak. That was unavailable at the time. To be honest, though, even if I had the choice between that, the Black Shark one, or the one which I ended up picking, which is the Alpha, I still would have picked the Alpha, because the Alpha is a bit more flexible in its design. So this is the Alpha Left grip. This is the one that I actually bought and have been using for the last 2 months with the Collective. And I've got to say, I do like it. It's pretty decent, mostly. Only niggles I've found is this center hat switch is a wee bit difficult to go left and right. Up and down's pretty good on it, but left and right can be a wee bit hard to do. It takes a reasonable amount of force. I'm guessing they've made that one quite forceful to have to move, because you're going to be reaching over it potentially to do these other buttons. So they might have done that deliberately to make sure you don't accidentally move it. It's got a nice wee scroll wheel, which is quite nice. So what I've been using the scroll wheel for is it's an encoder. So each roll forward is an up click, roll back is a down click. So those are button outputs. So what I ended up doing was using the Virpil configuration software and converting that into a virtual axis, a virtual analog axis. So what happens is if I press down, That centers the view at like 50% the way a normal analog axis would be. So that's your normal view. And if I roll forward, it zooms in. You know, it's looking more closely at the cockpit. And if I roll it back, it zooms back out again. Just be aware that this actually it's a two-level push. There's one initial push, and then you can push down harder for a secondary function on it. The rest of these hats and buttons are actually quite good. I use this for track IR reset, this for track IR disable. This other little three-way here at the side is quite good. The analog axis down here, the gripper, I've tended to configure that as if I grip it lightly, you know, maybe 10-15%, that triggers a cargo hook. And then if I grip it all the way to, like, I think it's set at 90 to 100%, it triggers another button which I use for cargo unhook. This little hat switch here is quite good. It's well placed. The little head on it's quite good too, so it's easy to hit the right directions on it without making a boo-boo. And yeah, this is obviously adjustable. This is your wrist rest, so you can move that up or down to suit your needs. There's obviously another tiny wee pinky button around here behind, which you can't see on this picture. Last and probably least is this little analog mini stick. Now this is on both the newer throttles on Virpil and on the right hand version of this grip. And to be honest, I'm not really using it much because I don't like it. This type of little mini stick, it's not using Hall effect or, you know, magnetic sensors. It's using old style potentiometers. So it's obviously up, down, left, right. So up and down is one axis, left and right is another axis, and then it has a push facility which you press on the button, and that's like a normal digital click. So yeah, I've had this a couple of months now. It's pretty good. I'm glad I picked the Alpha Left. It was the best, most sort of flexible option out of the three available. Now there is actually just honorable mention to people who might have some of the older Virpil equipment. There is a Delta grip that was made a couple of years ago that's went out of production for a year now, and it was an ambidextrous grip, as in it's not for left or right handed, it's kind of middle of the road. And it is suitable probably to put on the Collective if you have one of them lying around. So that's the grips. Right, so the Virpil mount itself, it's not bad. It can be used in like about 3 or 4 different ways, depending on what way around you want to bolt it. So I tried a few different permutations when the unit arrived. This is the default position that it actually comes. The mount itself was bolted to the Collective on. So I just dropped it onto the side of where my sim put is, stuck in 3 drop-in T-nuts and some bolts, and then just locked it down. Now I tried this for a couple of days or so, and I didn't like it because the length of this is moving the Collective quite far away from the chair. This is the edge of the chair here, by the way. So I tried it in the other permutation that would work in my setup, which is like the vertical mount. And the vertical mount was obviously closer, as you can see, but the Collective was too darn high, so it wouldn't really work the best way or the most comfortable way in either permutation of what way the Virpil mount was. About a week and a half to 2 weeks before the Collective arrived, I ordered off Monster Tech their mount, and it arrived in time, which is good. So I tried it out next. Now, sadly, the Monster Tech mount did not fit well with my setup. I mean, it's if you can go and look at the diagrams from the manual on the Monster Tech website. But basically, it's designed to be mounted horizontally, which means you need a aluminium extrude vertical piece somewhere round about here, pointing up, and then bolted onto it. And I wasn't going to stick another bit of ALU down there because I was going to get in the way. So what I ended up doing is when the Monster Tech one arrived, I tried measuring it out and swapping it around in whatever permutations I could. And I ended up then taking an angle grinder to it and cutting a large chunk off the side here, down this side. which allowed me to mount the collective a bit lower than it naturally would have been. But sadly, it's just still was suboptimal. It wasn't a great position even after butchering the thing. I mean, I could have taken more metal off it, but it was the right angle sort of structural piece that takes most of the load. I was going to be cutting off. So, and when I did cut a bit off it, it's I have to say the Virpil mount and the Monster Tech one, even the Monster Tech one is far fatter. It seems to have a lot more flex to it would be the best description, whereas the Virpil one is like pretty rock solid. So yeah, I tried a couple of different permutations of this, and I ended up abandoning it. What I did was I went and took the original Virpil mount and took an angle grinder to it. So this is the short end here, and this is the long end that was pushing it way far out before. So you ended up just taking an angle grinder to it and cutting a chunk of it off, enough of it so as I could put it up against and put a couple of bolts through here to secure it to the frame. This also is a little mod that I did to stop the cable from being damaged. A couple of cable ties and some sticky clips to actually route the cable better. So this is the current way I have mounted the collective, and it works pretty good. So covers that really. So let's have a chat about the cams. Okay, so there's three cams with it: 30, 40 degree and 50 degree. I've tried out the 30 degree, which is the default one, for a few weeks, and then tried out the 40 degree for a couple of more weeks after that before changing back to the 30. What do the cams actually do? So if you look at it from the side, this is at the down position, so the collective is all the way down, and I'll just rotate it and that's it all the way up. Now, when you change the cams, you basically change the angle that this is going to operate at between the down position and the fully up position, and they basically give you the capability of changing how much precision you get. The 50 degree cam is the largest one, and I just don't think it's actually suitable at all. If I was looking at this now and doing the cams, I would have done 30, 35 and 40, because even 40 is a bit much when you're actually physically moving this. If you buy one of these yourself and you bolt that onto your chair, you will discover the amount of swing you get. And the thing you got to remember is that when you stick your grip on the end, this is the alpha grip I got with it, the amount of swing that this arc is going to be considerably higher, and this thing needs to be comfortable. If you're going to be flying in a helicopter, like me and DCS, I would be flying like for a few hours at a time. Depending on the position of your arm and what way you're actually holding the end, you can get a lot of strain. So what I'm trying to say is you might have your hand and elbow quite high, depending on where you mount this on your actual chair. And this is pretty darn long here. So I figure that 30 degrees is probably going to be okay for most people. 40 degree if you want a wee bit more precision, but bear in mind it's going to be a lot higher, and then the 50 degree is pretty much useless, I would term it, because this is pretty long. I mean, your pivot point is here, and that is going to control how high up that's going to get. As in, if it's coming too high, you can mount this lower possibly on the setup you have. Maybe you have the capability of doing it, maybe you don't. I mean, mine's mounted pretty low down. So that's cams. Okay, so I've had this now for quite a while. I've had it nearly 2 months, and I waited this long to do a review on this because I wanted to have a good play with this, get a good feel for it, find out its strengths and its weaknesses, and then go through what they are. And there is one thing you need to be aware of in this design, and it's this. So you have these two adjusters on either side here which compress against this axis of movement to get the tension. Now the tension basically controls how much force it takes to lift, raise and lower the collective to, you know, control your helicopter when you're flying along. Now there's something to consider here, and it's this. This is the point of pivot, and everything forward of this is adding weight and pulling downward on the actual, on the collective. So what you're going to do is whenever you put your grip on, you're going to play with it for a while, and you're possibly going to need to adjust the tension on this to get something nice. Now here is the kicker. Because the weight on this is all facing downward and forward of the pivot point, you need to tighten this up enough so that when you take your hand off the actual grip, that the collective doesn't fall downward. If it's too loose, you take your hand off and things are going to fall and your helicopter is going to start heading for the dirt, and that ain't good. So you need to get enough tension on this to make sure that when you take your hand off it, it's not going to move. And it's a balancing act. And this is where the arc of movement on this will be different depending on what you're doing. So I'll break it down for you. Because the weight is pushing down here on this point of pivot, it's easier to lower the collective than it is to raise it up. It's just physics for you, because this point of pivot and everything forward of it is adding weight to it. You're basically, the clamping in here on the actual, the tension adjust is trying to balance out between holding the thing stable and then being easy enough to maneuver. And it's kind of a balancing act. I've played around with this a few times, loosening, tightening, and trying to get the balance just right. And if you get the balance wrong, like I say, you take your hand off it, it's going to fall. And if you get it too tight, then it becomes harder to get precise, because you're having to put a lot of force to actually move the thing either up or down. And like I just mentioned, because the weight of the arm and the grip is pushing down, it will always be easier to move, lower the collective, push it in the down, more downward than it is to raise it up, and it will always be like that. You can try and adjust it as best you can, but it's a fine line between the thing being stationary when you take your hand off it and it dropping. So just be aware of that. There is, I mean, you could possibly mod this if you were good at metalwork. I am not good at metalwork. I'm an electronics engineer, so I'm not good at that sort of stuff. And what you'd actually do would be, on this back end here, you would attach something, bolt something on here, some sort of weight, you know, maybe 500 grams to a kilo or something, to put extra counterbalance weight on this, and then it would be much easier. You could balance it right so that the arc of movement in both raising and lowering, the force required is more even. So just be aware of that. You might need to play with that a wee bit to get it right. And a few people online were commenting on the fact that they got their collective, and within like a week or 2 weeks they had to go and adjust this. And I don't see there's a problem with that. I mean, I've had to adjust this once within about a week of having it, and I just needed to balance the weight that was on here, because if I use a different grip, the weight is going to be different. If I use a lighter grip, it's not going to take as much force to clamp on it. So just be aware of that it is going to be easier to lower than it is to raise the collective. Right, so there are two models, the Plus edition which has the throttle part, and the non-Plus edition which doesn't have the throttle part. So let's look at the actual throttle part of this and go through what makes it up. First off, at the bottom you have this ring which you can adjust either clockwise or anti-clockwise, and that basically determines how much force it takes to rotate this. So you can loosen it or tighten it to whatever takes your fancy. Now let's look at the actual operation of this. To be honest, this is the only thing I have a point of contention how this has been designed, but I'll go through how it's supposed to operate versus how it actually operates in DCS. So, when you turn this anti-clockwise, you're going from 0 to 100%. So this is all the way around anti-clockwise, and it's at 100%. If I turn it around, you'll see this small switch. And it is a physical switch, it's not an electrical switch, it's a physical switch. You click forward and then it stops you moving or rotating the throttle out of this like roughly 100 to, I'm guessing, about 80% range. I've no idea why it's there, because you're not going to have your hand on this and moving it. You're not going to be pushing or pulling this part up and down when you're flying the helicopter, because the grip's at this position here at the far end. So I've no idea where to put this in. It's kind of a redundant component. So we turn it back now from 100% going clockwise. There's a little mark here, and you'll get to this position here and it will stop. This is approximately 48 to 50% of travel. And at this position, this is set for the idle position. So that's engines running full tilt. This is idle. And this whole part here has been designed to mimic the Huey in DCS. But unfortunately, there is a problem with how DCS treats this throttle, and I'll get to that in a second. So this is how it operates. You turn it around to here and it locks. You can't physically twist this anymore. You then press this button here in, and when you press that button in, it unlatches and allows you to turn this round. Now this is actually a physical and it's a physical lockout, and it's also an actual button. When you press this button and hold it down, button 1 will go active on your collective while that button's held. When it's pressed all the way in. So you press it in, and then you rotate, take the finger off, and then you can rotate this all the way around. This is rotated all the way around now to 0, so the throttle is fully closed. Now, this button is locked out now. I can't press it either physically or electrically, because we're in this less than idle going to engine off sort of position. And then I rotate round, increasing, and then you hear a click. So that's the wee latch re-engaging, and now you can't move it back. So basically this mimics the way the throttle is on the Huey. But in DCS, the throttle in the Huey doesn't actually work like this. And I'll explain why. So I take it all the way back to 0%, the way you would be wanting to start an engine up. So what you have to do then would be to turn this round from 0 to the idle position. You'll hear that little click. And then you would run the engine start button and the engine would start up. But DCS does not work like this. Even if I bind this full axis to the collective throttle on DCS, I can turn this all the way around, all the way back from now till the cows come home, and the virtual throttle within the cockpit will not move. It just won't move. Why? Well, that's because of the way DCS and Eagle Dynamics have designed it. The button on the keyboard for throttle increase is page up. So when you get into the cockpit, you switch your electrics on and get your inverters on, your hydraulics, fuel pump, ready to go, ready to start the engine. And what you have to do is you have to press page up on your keyboard. And what happens is you hold down page up on your keyboard, and when you look and see your throttle in the cockpit, it'll move out of this position, move out of the off stroke idle position into the run position, and then from that point you can turn your throttle and actually change it, and the throttle in the cockpit, the virtual cockpit, will actually follow it. So this is the big disadvantage that I see about this throttle part, is that the DCS doesn't actually implement this correctly. If they implemented it correctly, then I would take it round, you set it at 0%, I'd rotate, it would go to the idle position, and the virtual throttle, the representation of your throttle in the cockpit would follow this. It will not do this. You need to hold down page up, get it past the idle, and then this axis will respond. So it's kind of a bit crap, to be honest, especially saying to model this on the Huey, and then the Huey and DCS doesn't actually respond in this way. You're still going to have to press the page up on your keyboard to get it from like the off position round to idle, so as you can actually start the engines. So I'm sitting here in the Huey. I've got the start procedure prepped forward enough for me to now have to do the engine start. So let's have a look at how this actually operates, or more succinctly, doesn't operate in DCS. Now, the way the throttle works on the Huey is that right now it's round to the off position, and then I would twist it counterclockwise to bring it round to the idle position, leave it at the idle position, and then press the engine start button, and the engine would start. Pretty easy, sounds easy to do. But here's the kicker. So my physical collective throttle is all the way around, fully clockwise at the 0 position. Now I'm going to turn anti-clockwise to bring it to idle, and nothing happens. It doesn't move. Why doesn't it move? Well, it's because of the way DCS have implemented this. So it's kind of weird that Virpil went to mimic how this throttle operates when it doesn't even operate properly in DCS. So how do I get this thing started? Well, I can turn and twist the throttle from now till the cows come home, and nothing will happen. This cockpit one will not respond. Of two things I can do. I can hold down the mouse button and move the mouse to do the rotate, as you see right now. Or alternatively, I can just hold down the page up button, which is increase throttle keybind. So I've now moved it out of the past the idle cutoff position, and now I can twist it. And there you go. To see where it's you know, I am physically twisting the throttle, and it's mimicking it in the cockpit. Now I'm just going to press the idle detent button down so as I can move it past this. And there is, in DCS, where its actual idle cutoff is, because they're not at the same physical position. So that right now is at the idle position. So yeah, it's kind of weird. This doesn't operate properly the way you expect it to. It's kind of a disappointment that they did indeed. And I'll go through an engine start. So we are at the idle position right now. So let's go for engine start. So we just watch our gauge here. Once it goes past 40, I take my finger off the button, and it should continue on the starter self. Getting a little drafty in here. So that's the engine spooled up into idle. Now I'll twist and increase the throttle. And that's the throttle fully open. Now the way helicopters work is once you put the throttle to fully open, there's an automatic RPM governor in the engine that controls the RPM based on load on the rotor translation. If you're going and you're trying to gain a lot of lift and the rotor pitch is quite high and you're trying to gain altitude, then a lot more force is required to keep the rotor spinning at the same RPM, and that's where the RPM governor kicks in. So that's me showing you how the throttle part of the collective operates in the Huey, and that's it. You twist it round after having to use a key to actually unlock it, which is a bit of a pain in the arse, and then you will never ever touch that again. That's it. You know, the engine's running, you're never going to touch that again. So you're basically paying 121 euros to twist something for like 5 seconds in the game and then never touch it again. It's up to you to decide whether that 5 seconds is worth 121 euros. In my mind, knowing what I know now, I'd never have bought the Plus edition because it's not worth it. I mean, it isn't even implemented properly in DCS because the cutoff position, I'm just going to throttle back. The cutoff position there doesn't even match the cutoff on the physical throttle, because I'm having to actually, I'll do that again. So that's it fully 100%. I twist it back to the physical lock position, right? And it won't move anymore. But if I use the page down button, that's it now, sitting at the idle detent. So what I'm saying is the physical rotation does not match what the helicopter has. So it's shit on both counts, unfortunately. God, that low RPM's annoying. So there you have it. That's how it operates in the Huey. The helicopter it was designed to emulate, which it does not emulate properly, unfortunately. Right, have a quick look at the Virpil collective throttle part on the MI8. So for the MI8, you do not tick the invert tick box in the axis tune. And now, all the way fully anti-clockwise is at 0%, so that's it right down.
Generator 2, failure.
And if you wind it clockwise, that's the
Generator
max position
2,
now.
failure.
So with that
Generator 1,
unticked,
failure. Generator 1, failure.
Problem. So with the invert not ticked, then the twist that you do in the physical joystick will match what you see in the virtual one in the cockpit. Alright, let's have a look at the Virpil collective throttle part on the MI24. So like the MI8, it operates going clockwise to make and increase the RPM. So this matches what I'm doing on the actual physical collective throttle part. You know, I'm twisting to the left, twisting to the right, and that's it full way. So for the MI24, the invert is not ticked again. I haven't ticked the invert on the K50 either. It's only on the Huey that I've actually got the invert ticked. So that's it. Like, I mean, when we bring in the engines up to full operating speed, you're just basically going to twist this round full way, and that is the only time you're going to touch that. Basically, when you're on the ground. Alright, so let's have a look at the throttle on the K50. So the throttle's a wee bit different in the K50. You have two handles which can be controlled by keyboard keys or by binding axes. Now you've only got one axis here, so what I've had to do was create a virtual axis and slave it to the primary one. That's it full on. Like as an emergency mode, that's normal operation, and that is it down to the minimum idle position just by doing the twist. I'm using the twist to basically control both. That's the best way I can figure out of doing it. There is no differential between twist and and twist in the game and twist in the physical world, because they're just levers. They're not an actual twist. That one's easy enough to set up. Okay, so I've had this 2 months now. This is a review based on how it's performed over that time period, and this is the have you had any issues section. So let's have a look. Here is the picture of the collective itself. Obviously there's going to be a grip out here. So inside the main mechanism there are two bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom, that are clamped onto this central part, which is behind this little cover, and that is basically how the collective stops the collective basically moving by itself. There's a certain amount of pressure put on it, which you can increase or decrease accordingly, and that's how the you can move the collective to a position, take your hand off it, and it won't move. The issue with it is, well, I wouldn't say issue with the design, but this design, everything forward of this line here, everything going out this arm, and then obviously the grip attached at the end of the arm, is putting weight on this little clamp in here that's trying to stop the thing moving. So it's kind of a balancing act between having enough clamping force so that the collective doesn't drop or droop, and you're most likely going to get droop when this is at its lower position, because the lower the collective is, the longer the arc is. Well, not the arc's the same, sorry. The more force will be exerted on it. At a higher more vertical position, there's less actual force being pushed upon this. So if you are going to adjust this, I would say move it about maybe 20 degrees off all the way to the, down at the bottom, 20 to 30 degrees say, set it at that, and then tighten this adjuster until you get the right amount of force. You want to get enough force so that the thing doesn't move, but have it light enough so it's easy to move the collective to raise and lower it. Now, I did mention earlier about it is always easier to push this down than it is to pull it up, just due to physics. The only way you could ever get around that would be at the back end here, somehow attach a heavy-ish weight to counterbalance the weight that is forward of the pivot point. And if you did that, then you'd have to probably use a lot less clamping force on it, and the device would probably feel a wee bit smoother in movement. So like I say, you're going to need to adjust this periodically, because it will become looser over time. Now, here is the thing. I've had to do this 3, maybe 4 times now. The only thing that worries me right now is if this nut is slowly working loose, then that's okay. If this nut is not working loose, or the corresponding one at the bottom with wear and tear, then what's happening is inside here, the little clamp that is actually pressing on and exerting pressure to stop it moving by itself under gravity is slowly wearing. The only time will tell which one of the two things it is. So just be aware that you are going to have to adjust this when you get it, because I don't know what way this is balanced at the factory. If some of the grips might be heavier than the others, so you might need to tighten it more. Some might be a little bit less. So it's depending on your grip. So just be aware that that might be something that you might have to tweak with. Okay, the next one. So this is the picture of the little cable clips that are designed to provide strain relief for the cable, which is coming out of the collective here. Now, this is Virpil's first design where this connector and this cable are actually going to be moving, because for example, the other unit that I have right now is the CM2 base. It has a same connector, this XS9 connector, but when you bolt the thing onto your sim pit or the mount or whatever the hell you're going to do it, you're going to set it there and it's not going to move. This is the opposite. You put the cable through here, it's attached up here. This whole assembly here is going to move, and this thing is going to move about. So this is a picture with the cable on the clip. So obviously the cable is going to come around here. Now, providing you're not a complete idiot and don't make this super tight, then this is going to, it's going to move freely. As in, when you raise the collective up, this is going to move down. You lower the collective, then this is going to move up. So this is going to move. And what happened was my cable broke. After 2 months, basically 2 days ago, my cable broke. I had to take the cable, I had to cut off this plastic sheathing very carefully, take the thing apart, solder the wire, put it all back together again, and there we go, I'm good to go. So how do we look at the problem? And the problem is, this moves. Now, I also contacted Virpil support, who are indeed sending me out a new cable anyway, so I'm going to have a spare, and they were very quick, basically answered the ticket that morning and dispatched like 3 hours later. So kudos to Virpil support for coming through there. This is what I ended up doing myself. This is obviously, I've cut this and removed the plastic it was here because I needed to get at the wires inside. So what I have done is I've taken two of these wee sticky pads, which you can buy on eBay. Um, I don't know, they're like, I don't know, like a five or for like 100 of them. I use them for like working inside the PC and cable management basically. So I stuck a couple of these on. They're self-adhesive, a little back end strip you pick off. Push them on. They're pretty securely on, and then I put two cable ties very tightly. I mean, there is that cable cannot move. So basically, this is now all static, and the cable is going to move at this point here. So that's going to stop that cable getting worn and having problems with the wires possibly getting pulled. So that was the other thing I had. The next one, I mean, those two things are. I would suggest that the other people do either possibly the cable tie mod here. This last one was a bit odd. So this is a picture of how to insert the cams. Now, you don't actually insert the cams like this. You need to kind of slide them from below into this groove. So the problem that I had was this. It felt like, for want of a better word, at about 30-ish% of movement, you know, from 0 to 30, at about 30-ish or so percent movement, I was getting like, for want of a better word, like a bump, like a detent. So you pull it up, it was all nice and smooth, and it hit like a wee bump, went past the bump, and it was smooth again. And then if you move back down through the bump, you know, it was kind of weird. I don't know what it was. So after trying a couple of different cams and having the same problem, I knew it wasn't the cams. I thought there might be something wrong with the cams. So the only other thing I could think of was I wonder if there's something going on with this groove. And I got a cotton bud and put it round the groove, backward and forward, and lifted it out. And there was tiny little bits of metal swarf. They're little tiny metal bits, flakes. So once I did that and then put the cam back in again, it was all smooth, you know, smooth sailing. It was moving freely. Now, when I had the cams out, I took a couple of high-res pictures of them because I wanted to work out what was going on. And let's start from the bottom up. So this is the 50-degree cam at the bottom here. This has never actually been used, and you can see that it is nice and smooth. There's nothing untoward about it. Let's bring that in a wee notch. Can't. There. I was going to zoom out a wee bit there, but I can't. So this is the 50, this is the 40, and this is the 30. Now the 30 and the 40 were used. I had the 30 in for a while. I took it out, put the 40 in, used it for a few weeks, and took it out and went back to the 30. Ideally, in actually like a 35. A 35, I think, would be the sweet spot. 30 is a little bit too small. 40 is a little bit too big. I think 35 would be a sweet spot. But when I looked at them closely under this photograph, you can see that there is some, well, for want of a better word, wear happening on it. So don't know if this is going to be a long-term problem, and I don't know if that's where the little metal flakes came from or not. They could have been in the groove anyway, and they just got in the way, kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I've experienced with the collective problem-wise in the 2 months I've had it. So conclusions. How do I feel about the collective? What are my thoughts? Well, it's engineered pretty well. It's very solid. It's been well designed. It's not going to break unless you do something untoward to it. Electronics inside are well laid out. The cable management's good. There is no hot glue, which is great. The mounting mechanism, which is using 4 small screws, a washer, and then a large nut on top, is pretty secure. I've taken it on and off a few times, moved it around. Just make sure if you do that, you put all the screws in as tight as you can. Don't wring the head, but get them in there darn tight, and then get that locking nut down tight as well, and it won't work loose because there's a lot of force on that. It's fairly easy to adjust the tension to get it right for yourself. Like, I mean, it's just lift the wee rubber cover off, stick a hex key in, and adjust as necessary to get the amount of clamping on it, so get the sort of how much force you need to raise and lower it right. You don't want it too loose, you don't want it too tight. You just kind of a just right bit in the middle. You just have that balance point. You have currently a choice of 3 grips at the moment. There's the Sharka, the Hawk 60, and the Alpha L. I went for the Alpha L because I wanted a generic grip that was had enough buttons and axes and whatnot on it, and give me flexibility. It wasn't tied to any specific aircraft. For me, I still reckon that's the best choice. Cable management. Just be aware, this is the first Virpil product that uses cable management in such a way that the cable will be clamped, but the thing it's attached to, the end of the cable where the connector goes into the collective, is going to move. So you can see earlier on I put some sticky pads on the top of my collective, then put a couple of cable ties on it and routed the cable along that way to try and minimize the cable breakage that I had earlier. So how does it feel? It feels great. Gotta say, it's really good to have a proper collective when you're flying a helicopter in DCS, because it makes hovering and takeoff, low speed maneuvering and whatnot a lot easier to do. It's just far more precise because you've got a large angle of movement. I've tried the 30 degree and the 40 degree. I went back to the 30. Ideally, I'd actually like a 35. I know it's just sounded weird, but I think 35 would be a sweet spot. I contacted Virpil about that and asked them would they ever consider doing it 35 degree, and their answer was no. That's kind of sad. And yeah, I mean, I've tried all the DCS helis out. So I've been flying the Huey, the Mi-8, the Ka-50, the Mi-24. I don't really fly the Gazelle anymore because it's complete garbage and the flight model is terrible. But yeah, it is great to use in DCS. You've got enough for using the Alpha left grip on it. I mean, I've got enough buttons and axes and whatnot on it to control like the targeting camera and stuff in the Ka-50, and for doing other operations using the Mi-8 and Mi-24, etc. So, the burning question. Knowing now, from owning it for like 2 months, if in the future this broke, would I buy another Virpil collective? The answer is yes, definitely I would. Would I buy the Plus edition? No. And the answer is a categoric no chance. You only ever touch the throttle whenever you're on the ground and you're running the engines up to full operating speed. So that is the only time you touch the throttle. You don't ever touch the throttle apart from that in any helicopter, because all helicopters have an RPM governor in the engine. You just open the throttle wide open, and then the RPM governor takes care of actually controlling the RPM itself. So you're paying €121 for something you're going to use for about 3 seconds each time you start a helicopter. I just do not see that as good value for money. So I may actually have a go at modding the throttle part on this. I was wanting to see maybe if I could remove the physical lockout, because right now you're only getting about half of the rotation on it until you hit the lockout, and then you have to press the button and rotate it through the lockout. And if I could remove that, that might make it a wee bit better. Still don't think it's great value for money. Like, so if you are in the market for a collective, definitely buy the Virpil one, but don't buy the Plus one. It's just not worth the extra money. And see if there's €121 up for something more worthwhile. So yeah, that's my attempt at a review. Sorry it was so long-winded. Hopefully this will give you enough information to make a informed decision. So hope this helps. Stay safe out there and take care.